There we go. We are live on Facebook. Welcome to the What's On at Elephant and Castle Community Hub. I'm Nick from Retribe, and joining me today is Carlos Valencia Hernandez, a man who's so amazing. He's got three names. I'm so pumped up to talk to you today, Carlos. Thank you. Thanks so much for stepping in at this kind of short hour. It's a tough time of year to get people to speak because there's so much going on, and people will say that they can do it and then they can't. So I'm very, very grateful that a man of your caliber and your educational background and your cycling background can come on today and tell people, you know, in Southwark a little bit about you. But I know you are a medical doctor. You are a PhD in epidemiology, and right now you are doing research into cardiovascular disease at Imperial College London. And you're also, am I right, Imperial College London?
Yeah, that's my, I haven't started yet, but yeah, I will. Yeah,
you will.
January, I will be.
And you also like hitting the highway on two wheels and under pedal power. So I know you like to stay in shape that way. But thank you again so much for joining us. Can you kind of I know you're from Bogotá in Colombia, and I know that in this community it's a very Latin community. And I'm just interested to know, you know, your journey, you know, from a kid growing up in Bogotá to, you know, studying at Imperial College London. How did you get here? Tell us your story.
Well, yeah, I was born. I was the third son of a couple that my parents came from Tumaco, which is actually in the Pacific coast. And they came in the 70s to Bogotá. Well, because Bogotá is the economic power of the country. So well, they just went there to look for better opportunities, better jobs, and then I was born there. So well, it's funny because the culture in the coast is a bit warmer and like more open than it tends to be in Bogotá, where it's like, you know, the big city. So you have the effect of the big city. Everyone is rushing. Everyone is like, it's not so kind of neighbor oriented. It's a bit less warm than in the coast. So I can see that contrast between like me and my family sometimes in different things. Like for instance, I eat less fish than they do, or less like seafood, etc. And then well, I grew up there. I started well, I grew up in the late 80s and 90s. And well, it was a nice experience to see how like things were improving, like not only for my family but like for the city and the country in general. Well, there were like some like tough periods, like the 90s and the early 2000s. I mean, in like the political situation and stuff. And also, the economic situation that at least in my family, I grew up in a middle income class family. So education was kind of the way of going forward. We didn't have like properties or anything. My mom kept, and my dad kept us talking about education as the only way to go through. And I guess that's why I kind of we all of us started like pursuing that. Just trying to like get into uni and all that.
Where did medicine become part of your kind of ambition? At what age did you know that you wanted to go into medicine?
I think when I was a teenager, I started. I remember, all like most kids want to be policemen or firemen. And I actually, well, I wanted to be a bus driver. When they asked
Nice.
me, yeah, well,
Yeah.
it was so interesting for me to see all these levers and buttons in the bus
I
that
used to love it when they used to open the door, the machine that opened the little handle. I used to love that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, those were the older buses, like the
Yeah.
new one, the fancy ones had a button, and
Mm.
yeah.
I'm older than you then, right?
um, yeah, and then yeah, it was kind of like I had like a lot of there were a lot of books in my house. So well, I kind of stopped or like I kind of went quickly through all my like child books. So I started getting whatever it was available there. And my dad, he's a teacher of biology and chemistry. Well, he's retired now, but he was an active teacher those times. So I had all these books about like biology of parasites and yeah, life sciences. So that kind of interested me. So I got kind of I followed on that, and I think yeah, that's when I said okay, I like to go into medicine. Um,
Did you ever have to dissect a frog at school?
I'm
Because I
sorry.
think that's what, did you ever
Yeah,
have to
no,
do
no,
the
no.
frog? That put me
Yeah.
off of anything kind of medical, dissecting a frog. That was gross.
No, not before entering medical school. Like
Right.
after I entered medical school, there was one day where we had to um, yeah open like a rabbit. So that,
Ooh,
but that was before. But yeah, so I think the interest well conveyed in this like social thing, like this kind of I want to help my community and stuff. Well, I guess also well the biology thing it helped as well. Yeah. Yeah, and well, although there are many ways. Well, now I realize there are many other ways to help people. Like I used to say back then, oh yeah, I want to become a doctor and save the planet and save the society and help everyone. Yeah, that was kind of the driver. Like that was the idealistic, my idealistic self going into medical school.
yeah. I wonder about that. It's funny to think that growing up, like you say, a lot of kids, we always have these when we're younger, we're thinking about being, a fireman or firefighter or police officer or a spaceman, a space cowboy. And then we start to get molded. And I'm wondering nowadays where it's kind of this thing of like you pursue this passion, this need to want to help people. And a lot of people will go into, the kind of, therapeutic professions or counseling or being a doctor. Do you think that people are kind of born with certain character traits to want to either wanting to help or maybe kind of having a different energy and wanting to go into finance, or maybe having a different energy and wanting to go into construction and architecture? Do you think that people have different character traits at younger ages?
Yeah, I do think that. But also, yeah, I think it's both the like this part of this altruistic self, like oh, I want to
Mm,
help society and stuff. But also it comes like the part of like oh, I want to occupy this role in society. And I think, well, I can't deny like still today people like think, oh yeah, doctors are like a very well respected part of the society, so I
mm,
want to, that's something, that's a role that I want to play on. Yeah.
mm.
um
I think
So
that's it. Sorry,
yeah,
carry on.
no, there is some, yeah, there are different parts to it. But yeah, there are some traits definitely, but like that, I think, in my opinion, is like moderated a lot by the society, because well, like yeah, studying medicine is not the only way of helping. I mean, you could I don't know, volunteer and save animals or save the Amazon. Like um, there are many other ways. And actually, I remember that specifically because I said something like that in the interview at the medical school, and like one of the interviewers was like, "Oh, but you're not. This is this is not the only way of helping people or helping the society." And in most times, well, you won't be working for free. You will want to have a salary, so this is not just charity work. So I guess it's the combination of, yeah, this taste or this um, inclined for like being around people, but also like the interest about biology, physiology, like things specific to medicine.
I want to kind of get into this idea of like how do we start to nurture, younger people? And I think that's the thing is like when I was growing up, parents were very regimented in their kind of how they want the journey of their kids to go, which is like high school, play a lot of sports, maybe get a scholarship, be really good at being part of a community and being popular, and then get into higher education and go to school and become. It was a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher. Those were kind of the big things where I came from, and it was really
Priest.
the parents were the parents were really pushing the kids, and I'm very grateful that my father was kind of like, go to England, you've got a British passport, go and play some ice hockey, have some fun for a couple of years, then go to university. I'm really glad that because it kind of made me follow a path which I'm not on today, but I all of a sudden ended up in an industry in advertising and broadcasting that, I wouldn't have said I wanted to be on TV. I was okay at it, but I learned an awful lot, and it's guided me into a place now where, when I was 45 years old, I am doing something now completely different to when, I was 18, 19, and 20. So I think now it's really this idea of how do we nurture, people, youth, and even people in their early 20s and getting a little bit older into kind of fulfilling these purposes rather than these professions. You just are filling a wonderful purpose, but you're also it is your profession. And I know you do an awful lot of work. I know you privately too, and it's an awful lot of work. So it's more than just financial, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, like now that you mentioned the finances, I remember like the first day I went into medical school, and there was this classmate who only lasted like the first week, and then by the end of the first week, he was like, you know what, I'm not gonna make money if I get to be a doctor. So I'm switching to finance school, and then he left. Uh, so yeah, he's now an economist who works in banking and that kind of stuff. And I mean that's his decision, and it's totally respectable. So yeah, like then I think, well, of course you can kind of chase well, economic well-being or like a higher salary in every profession or activity that you do. So I don't think that's exclusive to one, although well, there like it is way more likely that you get a high income if you're in finance than if you are a doctor. No, yeah, and yeah, I think my my first kind of thought was like, yeah, I'm not, yeah, I hope, of course, to like have a good income, but I'm not expecting to get rich, you know.
Yeah. No, I think there's a big thing now today where I'm definitely finding it out at my age, that there's a real big difference between being, money motivated and financial motivated and having all of those things that kind of Instagram world wants us to have to make it look to the world that we're successful. When really, my most, I don't know, fulfilling days are the days where I'm doing some volunteer work, helping people in recovery. And I think that's the balance that I've had to find is that you obviously need to have a job that helps pays the bills, but where do I feel most rewarded? And that is when I can be of service and help somebody. So I hope that kind of helps people along the way of like being able to find these kind of altruistic, purpose-led professions that can hopefully help them make a living and stuff. But because both are I'm not saying they're equally as rewarding, but we always have to make some money. And I'm wondering now about epidemiology, because can you so as an MD, you've done your time in hospitals and A&Es and helping people along their path of physical healing, but how did you get into epidemiology, and what exactly is epidemiology?
Well, yeah, that was a bit of a transformation, because well, I was like I liked well, being around people in hospitals. Like I really enjoyed my time, for instance, like doing like rounds in the surgical team, for instance. But I thought I started to think that there were more things outside the four walls of the hospital. So then, well, I started working in some projects that were more public health oriented and were like outdoors. For instance, working with rural communities. So I was involved like in research projects in public health, where I had to deliver like medical attention to rural communities, and then I started doing a project delivering medical attention in indigenous communities in Sierra Nevada, Santa Marta, which is like a beautiful place, but also has some issues of health inequalities, especially in the indigenous communities, where access to healthcare is very limited. So I started like doing a combination of the two, like the sides, like the clinical and the public health like side, and then I became like a full-time researcher. I said, well, I need to improve my skills in research. So I thought, yeah, epidemiology, which is well, basically a discipline that is in care of describing the frequency and distribution of health events in human populations. Um, Although there is veterinary epidemiology, but that's the kind of the definition of epidemiology. I thought it was another world that allowed me to grasp how health events and how like health and disease dynamics within the population were kind of happening, and that interested me, and that's why I kind of started like formally studying it. Yeah, and then well, that's when I did a master's in public health back in Colombia. When well, I used to work. I still worked in public health research with those indigenous communities, and then I started to study a master's with in public health with a component of epidemiology. Yeah, and I actually, well, sorry if I'm not going linear, like having a linear trend, but going back to what you said about like how altruistic some people in certain professions can be. My thesis degree for my thesis project for the masters was about rural doctors, like the conditions of rural doctors in Colombia. And that was because, well, there are some countries, like right now, like 80, 90 countries. Well, back then when I did that research, like in around 90 countries, there is some kind of requirement for doctors to go on the countryside and practice there, because, well, usually the phenomenon is that doctors are more concentrated in big cities. So, and actually Canada has one sort of program like that. That is not mandatory, but you kind of get better access to health, to home loans, on better like some advantage points for if you're trying to get more training, things like that. So if you can go to the Yukon and practice there for X number of years, they give you these advantages.
Yeah.
That's kind of those are kind of a stimuli, but in Colombia it is sort of mandatory. So you need, like, when you get your medical degree, you get like a provisional medical license, and then you have to go to the countryside and stay there for a number of months in order to get your full license. And that was like built or set up in order to stimulate like the presence of doctors in the countryside. But then what happens is that still like the conditions in many places are not optimal, especially if you just finished your degree. So like if you are in a population or in a town that is like separated by the separated like 12 hours on a canoe or on a boat on the river, like it's like you should have access to many things and to a full team in order to do things that are urgent. But like rural doctors in many cases are like under-equipped, understaffed. And then you would think like, oh, perhaps they are doing it for the money, or but the wages are not that high. So when I asked the perceptions, their perceptions about that, many of them said like, yeah, I'm doing this. About 30% of the rural doctors of that year that I interviewed were doing that out of mere kind of altruistic purpose. So yeah, there is still something on that.
Yeah, and I'm sure you get to kind of treat the odd horse or cow out in rural environments too. I bet you doctors have to do just about everything. So after your journey now is into kind of looking at epidemiology, and I know you kind of briefly described what it is, but I want to get into how did you end up coming to London to study?
Yeah, there were many. Well, London is a very well, it's a big center for epidemiology and, well, science in general. Actually, a curious side story for those who are listening to us who are in London. Like one of the fathers of modern epidemiology was an English doctor called John Snow, not the one of Game of Thrones, but it was he was a GP in the area of Soho, and this was the 19th century, and there was a massive epidemic of cholera, and those times there it was some years before Pasteur and Koch, who described microbia and all this. So we as the general knowledge didn't know that there were bacteria that caused diseases. So at that time the general knowledge was oh, there is some bad air going around that makes us sick. So people thought, oh yeah, it's just the air of this area of Soho that is keeping us sick. That actually made of all the wealthy individuals to all wealthy families to flee Soho and going to Marylebone and other more affluent places. And this John Snow, this doctor, he said oh, there should be something up to it. There must be something else. And then he checked. He started doing going house by house and asking people where did you drink? What's the source of water in this house? And then he suddenly discovered that some people who drank, or the families who tended to drink more out of a pile of a tap that is in Broad Street, they usually were more likely to get cholera. So then he said there is something up to this tap, and he actually did a deep investigation and followed the pipelines of the taps, and then he realized that the water that came to that tap in Broad Street was actually being fed by a pipe that was beside a sewage pipe, and then that's how he discovered that was the source of the cholera epidemic. And he didn't discover bacteria or microbes in the water, but he knew that there was something there that caused the disease. And then actually he told the police to cut off the flow of that pipe, and then he kind of saved the day and stopped the epidemic of cholera in Soho. So that was kind of one of the first early examples of epidemiology, that was checking a pattern in a population and trying to establish some possible explanations for health events or disease events in this case. So that kind of reasoning, of John Snow, kind of gave way to a long tradition of public health and hygiene professionals. And we here in London there is the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, which is one of the most famous in the world. So yeah, London was, going back to me, London was a big center for epidemiology. And then, I didn't want to study infectious epidemiology, infectious disease epidemiology. I was more interested in cardiovascular disease. So I came to study in University College London, where one famous cohort study is based, that is called the Whitehall 2 study. A cohort study, it's something in epidemiology that is, cohort comes from a Roman word that it's called, means group, those were the cohorts were the for some formations of the Roman army. So if you those were units that were solid, and then they kind of were they were shielding, all they formed like a turtle's how do you say a turtle's cover? I forgot the name.
Shell, a shell.
Yeah, like the shell of
Yeah,
a turtle. So anyone
yeah.
attacking them couldn't like do anything because they were a unit. So a cohort in epidemiology is like a sort of a population unit that shares an exposure. So like in a cohort, you follow people over time, or a group of people over time, and then they are usually healthy by the start of the study, and then as long as they are going to like developing certain health outcomes, you start to check, oh, what exposures did they have, and how can we explain those health issues. And this study was well, famous because they, well, in the first part, in the Whitehall 1 study, they kind of describe how cardiovascular disease was differently distributed according to the social class of the individuals. So they well, though we say it like is mainstream culture right now nowadays, saying that, oh, stress and stressful life, having low control over your work environment is detrimental to your health. Um, but back then wasn't like that really well. It wasn't really known. So they became to see that like how the social inequalities, and how like people who were like in lower social class and lower work positions would get higher um, cardiovascular disease because they were like they had like access to uh, food of lower quality, have less exercise, more physical strain, low control over their jobs compared to individuals with people who were managers. So so that was kind of well, that was interesting for me. And well, running those kind of studies is a luxury that well, it's mainly, yeah, like mainly like high income countries can afford. So that's how I said like, oh, London is an interesting place for me, and I came here.
Yeah. It's interesting. It was just yesterday. Someone was telling me about the story about the cholera outbreak in Soho, and how, you know, basically you had all these cows that would live, you know, in the basements and cellars of properties, and how you have all the dogs on the top, and all of them creating a lot of poop. You know, and that was, you know, and then it infecting the you know, the water systems, and the cholera outbreak. And then, you know, so yeah, sorry, it was just funny that someone was telling me that story yesterday, because I think Soho only had something like 3 different sources of water, and lots of piles of poop. So yeah, I'm glad that London became an interesting place for you for several reasons, but also the fact that there was a lot of poop flowing down the streets. And then now you're studying in London. What was it like coming from Colombia to London? What was it like when you first got here?
Well, it was well, you know, it's a bit, well, I wouldn't say as big as something as big as a shock, but it was like, oh yeah, like well, there are some these little like changes that like you don't realize you appreciate, but like you do. So like well, being able to um you know, go around, like transportation is easier, and a bit of like street safety, that those kind of things, like you don't really appreciate them, like they're like, until you don't, some things that you don't really appreciate until you like get to see them. So well, I used to be more like like public transportation people, person back there, or like or I had a car, so I wouldn't like be walking around yeah, that kind of availability of like being able to, I don't know, just take a walk home, uh, late hours, and not being worried about like safety. That was one thing. But apart from that, well, it also struck me like the diversity of London, because I thought it was going to be yeah, more a less diverse place, but
Yeah.
yeah, it is being able, like being, yeah, it's so sometimes you feel like in the Babel Tower, like there are many like cultures and languages and views around you, that
Yeah.
that is really like an experience that like it's good for your soul. Like you get, like if you are around like the same people who are like you, well, it's nice, but then you don't get to see what's beyond the fence.
No, I agree. I know that London for me is always, and it's different for me as a a white-bodied man. Um, but from my black and brown bodied male friends and female friends, that is the one thing that London is, they've always said, is it's one of the most accepting places, and one of the most, that we talk about diverse cultures, but it's very inclusive. Actually people are very welcoming, especially when you get into more central London. And that's why I've always loved this city, and I'm glad that it's been welcoming for you.
Yeah, well,
And I was
that,
sorry, Karen.
no, that without saying like that there were not like experiences of kind of nuanced or more obvious like discrimination or racism. That yeah, actually the first the first week I arrived, I had a like not bad, but yeah, like an awful kind of incident with someone shouting things at me. So he wasn't like really happy about diversity at all. Um, so yeah, and I know um, those experiences like tend to be more common, like if you are on a different socioeconomic and educational background. So yeah, that 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 happens.
Yeah,
So
I'm
yeah,
sorry that
there's
happened to
no
you.
there is
It,
no, yeah, there are
yeah,
both sides.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, and
So sorry, carry on.
no, just a little connection with the those kind of experiences in Colombia, because well, sometimes you say like or people tend to think like, yeah, well, in Latin America in general, like there are many ethnicities or races mixed, so there is no discrimination because everyone is kind of happy with each other and almost holding hands. Um, but yeah, there are also kind of differences. Yeah, and I could witness some of that when I was growing up as like a black kid in this more light-skinned city that is Bogota. But yeah, well, I'm a proud Bogotano.
Yeah, you are, and I'm glad you're here. And now I want to kind of tie in the cardiovascular side of things, which is that's everything around the heart, right? Am I
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And you cycling a lot, so obviously you like to kind of make sure that you exercise your heart. But there was a guy, Carlos, that I met, and he was back in Canada, and he was like some expert cardiovascular surgeon. I think he studied strokes, or the effect of strokes, or how to mitigate strokes in people. And when I kind of got down to talking to him, he said, "Well, basically, I want to teach people or study how to grow older." And I was like, "Oh, you're gonna defy death and all that." We made a joke about it, and I said, "Well, so what's the secret to long life?" you know, because I was expecting some really kind of convoluted answer about taking vitamins and supplements and exercise and stuff. And he just said to me, he goes, Nick, always stay hungry. And I was like, what? He goes, your body. He goes, we tend to, one of the biggest things is we just overeat, and our body doesn't have enough time to actually work its magic in cleaning all the cells and doing all the stuff that it wants to do to make sure that our heart and our other organs are in shape, because it spends so much time processing food. So he was like, in a nutshell, just stay hungry. And I thought that was kind of really easy, because we can overcomplicate things a lot. And especially today with all the stuff that's going on with COVID and everything, and everyone's talking about what to do and how to avoid it, and vaccines this and anti-vaccine that. And it's just a very confusing world of information out there. And what I really appreciated with this guy is it was a very simple thing of just watch what you eat, you know, make sure that you do exercise, just do all the little simple things right. And your body's an amazing thing and will be able to look after itself. So with regards to you, you know, and your cycling and stuff, do you think that just taking this kind of simple approach of not confusing things too much is a good approach to take?
Yeah, it's a very good approach. I mean, we I say we, like, I include myself as a society. We don't really, or many of us have lost at some point of our lives, like the kind of the compass on like what should we, or like we don't really, like, sometimes don't watch what we are having. And that's like, rather than kind of going and blaming the individual, that is something that really happens. And I don't know if that is a situation that has happened to you, but sometimes you go to the doctor and they say, like, oh yeah, you know, you have not done this, you have not done exercise, you are eating this, blah blah. But we are part of, like, a society, right? So we have we're usually, like, subject to, like, a lot of stress, like no time for family, like really long working hours. So if you have to, like, feed a big family, you barely have time to like, kind of rest, because you get very tired, and all the thing all that you want to do is just to sleep and get ready for the next day. So, like, the easier options of food, or the cheaper food available, is the one that is more caloric, and with less nutrients. Well, I mean, it's easy for me to say, oh yeah, like, go do 3 hours of bicycle and eat broccoli and salad. But then in some cases, like, a broccoli can cost, like, loads, in a way that it doesn't make it sustainable for a family of 5 or 6. So yeah, that's going back to your question, that's a good advice. But then we have to keep also the kind of the perspective of the world that we're living in, and we should kind of try to make all these kind of healthy foods and healthy environments available to people, because for some of us that can be kind of really, like, a very well-known advice, but then, like, there are some people who don't know about it because they haven't had access to talks or specific counseling about that. And sometimes they are just told by someone, like, oh yeah, you are not being well fed, because, like, yeah, blaming the individual.
It's funny, because I was just thinking about it, as I said, that what I was talking about, I'm talking about it from a point of privilege. You know, I'm privileged that I can, you know, maybe just do the little things right. But then I was thinking about when all of a sudden something might happen with business, and we have a month or two where finances are not coming in like they used to be. You know what I'll do, Carlos, is instead of like going to Tesco's or a grocery store to do a big shop, I'll go to McDonald's and spend £3.50 on a triple cheeseburger and fries, because that's like, oh, I'll get some food in me, and it'll only be £3.50, but that's cheaper than going and buying a chicken breast and a broccoli.
Yeah.
And it's so easy, to go for when things are a little bit tight budget wise, to go to the cheap, ugly options. And I think it was unfair of me to say, just do the little things right, when really it's kind of as a collective of people who sit in privilege, what we need to do is to make sure that everyone has access to being able to do those little things right, which is this idea of, I suppose, why we're doing what we're doing, right? It's just trying to make the world a little bit better place, and try to make things a little, try to change the system so that it becomes more fair to people. So, we've already hit our 45-minute timeline, and I know that you are a very, very busy man. So I can't thank you so much for joining me today, Carlos. I really appreciate it. When are you going cycling again?
Next Thursday.
Next Thursday. And roughly how many miles do you do on your little cycling journeys?
Well, during the week, I go twice during the week, like Tuesdays and Thursdays usually. So it's 30K each day. On miles, that would be like 20-ish, 25. Yeah. And then a longer journey on the weekend. I go.
And make sure you wear a helmet, right?
Yeah, I do.
Good. Protect that brain of yours.
Yeah, I will.
Thank you so much, Carlos, for joining me today. Thanks everybody for joining us at the What's on at Elephant and Castle Community Hub. Don't forget to join me on Thursday at 11 a.m. for our Tough Through Tender workshop. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Carlos. Have a wonderful day. And we'll talk to you soon. Okay, buddy?
Bye.
Bye.